Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Messenger on the Rural Agenda. I'm here with my colleagues Prachur and Jonathan and Adrija, and we're going to talk a little bit about our wonderful collaboration with Rural Voice on the Rural Agenda. I would like to start with our observations on how rural citizens see themselves as citizens and not just as farmers or as laborers or as some very specific community. We have done work with them on the budget charcha, for example, a while ago. So it's a good place for us to start thinking about rural citizens as citizens.
A really good example of a farmer or a rural participant being a complete citizen would be in the case of this gentleman who was a farmer and an educator in a village in Meghalaya. So when he put forward his aspirations, the issues that he faced, all the points of view that were coming out represented that of as an educator, as a teacher in a local school in this district in Meghalaya. It reflected that of his view as a farmer. He also was sensitized about the issues of the lack of roads that were affecting the crop produce with the markets. He understood that he was aware of the issues related to the lack of hospitals. Because of that, the roads were not connected to the hospitals. All these issues, like in that would be that a rural area that they will face. So you can see that prime example of a citizen of the country, but acting in his full rights and putting forward these thoughts even before a local government. So they feel they're completely participating in the citizenship process.
We also realize that rural citizens are quite active politically, and they're politically aware. For example, many places we heard that corruption in local governance and in electoral politics is a big challenge for them. It's a concern, and they feel that's a major reason for a lot of developmental work not getting completed. And especially in Coimbatore, we heard that farmers were very aware about issues like pollution, and they were aware of the laws, bodies that control things like wastewater dumping in rivers. So we realized that they're not just aware of their ecology, their exact surroundings, but they're also aware of larger issues that are affecting them locally.
Because we did have a geographical spread in our work, did you feel these ideas of being member of a society, a larger society, whether as citizen or not, were there differences in the places, or was it relatively uniform?
When we started off with our convenings, the first two regions were more male-centric participants, and we moved to states like Odisha and Meghalaya, which has a lot of tribals and women. But although there was a diversity of participants, the major issues were similar across the participants. Like most of the major highlighted points with respect to be it climate change or prices of crops, input support from the government, or lack of education and health facilities. All of this cut across all the 5 regions.
The animal-human conflict, for example, was a big issue in many parts of the country. But it was differently flavored, like in Muzaffarnagar it was cows, in Odisha it was other animals, in the Nilgiris part, the Coimbatore part, it was a lot of wildlife. Those flavors came out strongly. Then there were definitely some local issues that found more prominence. For example, roads in Meghalaya were a big issue. In Rajasthan, water was a big issue. In UP, for instance, overuse of fertilizers and pesticides came across as a big issue. So there were definitely local flavors. There were some local issues that had more issue, and some things got more prominence. For example, while political corruption was there mentioned in a few places, in Tamil Nadu it got more prominence. People were very articulate and specific about very local problems, like that bridge is not being built, or that water supply, that pipes have been laid but not being given. The school or the health center in our village is not functioning.
So like this basically, if you look at like from the tribal population perspective, where like states like Odisha and Meghalaya, they wanted to emphasize a lot on indigenous seed preservation, or using indigenous knowledge to merge with traditional knowledge, or looking for, because they belong to areas where tribals don't get a lot of notice by the state governments. So they mentioned in their aspirations that they wanted a robust representative, like an indigenous leader, to take their thoughts to the central government. So this was something that was unique in the tribal belt.
I also felt like there were differences not just in the cross regions, but also in the kind of participants. So I realized that this is something I observed, that farmers in all these places were more organized. So they were much more vocal about their issues related to agriculture, and they also had their demands in place, what they needed to change. So maybe it was like being part of a larger group and identifying as a farmer helped them to articulate their challenges and their demands from the government better.
As opposed to, you mean laborers or other?
Yes, as opposed to, say, laborers or youth or even women. So
Mhm.
their concerns as another interest group didn't come out as strongly as those of farmers.
This was very evident in Uttar Pradesh, like where you saw the farmers were actually, they had a clout with the political class, and there was large landholders. So it stands with what Aditya just said.
Yeah. It might also have to do with the caste composition of the
Yes.
farmers in Western UP. Some people find it easy to represent themselves, others don't. How did we work to create spaces where many different voices were heard? How hard was it? What were the challenges?
I feel in places, for example, places like Odisha, Jodhpur, where were able to bring in our local partners in
Mhm.
confidence, take them through our design process, tell them about, in case places when we went to Odisha, it was the one after UP. So there was a learning from the previous convening. We would interact with the local convening partner to understand the diversity of participants, and we created a kind of a matrix for participants cutting across Samaj Sarkar and Bajaj, and also representing all vertically all levels of the government. So
Mhm.
be it like at the Panchayati Raj level or
Mhm.
at district level. Step by step, as we went on from one convening to the other convening, we sharpened our way of ensuring like diverse participants. To when we moved on to Odisha and
Mhm.
Meghalaya, we actually had a good spread of the kind of participant mix that we wanted, including FPOs, entrepreneurs, marginalized people, migrants. We had tribals, we had young adults, we had youth. So it was a really good mix of participants to get a good collective like discourse.
Things really had affected the kind of participants and the spaces we designed. One was our
Mhm.
conveners, our partners, and
Mhm.
in many cases, when we had one single convener, we were not able, it was not that easy to diversify the participants, to get diverse participants from different occupations, because usually they had one interest group they were working with. But
Mhm.
in some cases, we did get that mix, like in Orissa. And the
Mhm.
second thing that I think affected it was the local kind of politics of that place. For
Mhm.
example, in UP, it was much more segregated on the basis of caste and religion. But in Orissa, in Meghalaya, and in Tamil Nadu, we had quite a diverse mix of participants, including women.
Mhm.
So it was essentially these things, and I think we took some steps on our part to make sure to address those power imbalances. Like for example, in
Mhm.
Rajasthan, we helped the women. We thought that the women, their issues would come out more strongly if they were presented as group.
Mhm.
So they discussed their issues amongst themselves and surfaced the challenges that they face and presented it to the whole audience. So that
Mhm.
kind of both ensure that they have a dialogue with the men, but also that the
Mhm.
issues come out strongly.
Was it common for you to do this sort of on the spot reconfiguration? You got to a place and you thought that, okay, here is some tweak we need to do to make sure that it goes better than it would otherwise.
A good example of on the spot tweaking to
Mm.
make it an all inclusive process was also in, like Aditya said, in what do you call it? In Jodhpur, but in Meghalaya, because of the
True.
different language barriers, we
Mm.
realized that the people from the Garo community would not be able to understand, because we facilitated both in English, and Khasi was
Mm.
well understood by the larger districts, but the Garo districts would be left out. They also had a translator on the table, but we realized that in order to have the mixed group sessions, we decided to club two groups to merge them together so that it would be easier to facilitate and them involved in the participatory process.
In that respect, I think Northeast was very different.
Yeah, I'm sure.
In the sense, gender and caste were not the issues. Tribes seemed to be the point of difference here. Compared to other parts where I think the standard gender and caste norms are more prevalent. We would become better by doing, I think on the gender front, the planning for it was lesser because I think it needs to be much more consciously thought through, and I think some of it is hard. I don't know whether we have answers to get women out of the house that easily, both in terms of the household responsibilities that they usually have, as well as the fact that they have to travel sometimes, which is hard both in socially and so how do we solve for that? It's not just about resources. For example, and we face this even when we did the farmers jury, that even if you tell women that we will pay you and we'll pay you more and you can get somebody with you, it doesn't solve the problem because they say that ghar ka kaam kaun karega, right? I mean, who is going to do? I have parents in the house, I have a kid, so I need to be there to look after that. And so when we do a day-long convening, it just shows that men are more easily able to take time out from their responsibilities than women. And how do we actually solve for that? We can do half-day gatherings with women more easily in the place where they don't have to travel. Those would obviously be more feasible, and we do more of those. We have to change the format and expectations differently in that case.
Yeah. But given these ongoing challenges, what were the big insights from this very diverse group of people, 400 to 500 people across several geographies with varied personal as well as livelihood backgrounds?
I think one of the personal revelations that I had was that there is no one idea of the rural that we can hold anymore, because not just the fact that we are so diverse and that the meaning of the rural changes every 10 kilometers, but also that the rural is changing so fast because of globalization, because of urban rural migration, that we cannot hold on to that idea anymore. So all our thinking around the rural needs to change to take cognizance of that reality. And the second thing that I think really stuck was that in the cities we are aware of ecology, but it is only when a big event or say an extreme weather event happens that it comes to our consciousness. But in the rural, it's an everyday challenge that they struggle with and that they face. So that kind of across all professions. So when it came to things like climate change, or especially for farmers, when it came to pest attacks or human-animal conflict, these things were at the forefront of their consciousness. It was in their everyday. Include that much more in our policy making and thinking around the rural.
I just want to extend Adrija's point further and say I don't think there is a rural imagination as much anymore at all, in the sense of what villages should be like. I didn't get a very distinct sense. People framed rural mostly in terms of what facilities they didn't have, which is better education, and by better education it meant better colleges and the health opportunities and some of those areas and avenues for young people. And I don't think there was a sense of there is imagination around rural that is distinct from urban. It seems like the aspiration is to be urban in the place where they are. And that was missing. And the problems that predominantly were talked about in the urban setting, whether it is ecology or lifestyle health problems or drugs are more rural problems. I mean, as prevalent in rural India as they are in urban India. And definitely it is hitting them hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember like through all our discourses, uh, things that came out uh, from the perspectives of the rural citizens would all be things that are aspirational in nature. It is not something ki they feel ki we need to go back to that time. They want to go ahead. They want better jobs. They want better roads. They want better leaders. They want to put forward their voices. And even things like that we talk regularly, climate change. They may not use the term, but they're aware of the ramifications of dry, hot sun or extreme rainfalls and all of that. But this picture of a rural India is mostly like even the youth, more all of them want to move out of the villages. They want to go out for better jobs, education, and health. So it is like it's like reducing.
I think the average age of an Indian farmer is in the 50s.
That was something we came across in a lot of places, that farmers everywhere said that no one from the youth, the next generation, wants to get into farming. So that's going to be a huge challenge in the next decade or so.
All of this gives me a sense that everything is changing. There are aspirations, there are maybe frustrations and deteriorating environmental conditions, which leads to the last question. Where do you think this can go? What's the value of doing an extended exercise like this that takes several months and needs many partners?
Moving from a single to a series gave us a perspective that was much wider, much more grounded than what we have done earlier. So, this fact that we did it in 5 states across 60 districts over a period of 6 months or so gave it a much wider and grounded perspective that also brought about the commonalities and emphasized and underlined what they were, as well as showed us some of the differences in various parts of the country. When we shared some of these insights with people we know in the policy system, I think they were also surprised or thought this was new information, because an ear to the ground of is hard to come by. And the fact that we did an agenda-less space in some sense, it wasn't a focus group discussion only talking about a particular theme. How do you use mobile phones, or what is your opinion on this? It was a very broad issue. It allowed for various points to emerge that probably wouldn't have emerged. For example, that national political themes that are more closer to cultural identity are also finding voice in many states where we interviewed and spoke to people. And if we can imagine this as a more visually attractive product, synced with some things, either a state election, national elections, or something else, this can actually become like the annual Pew survey of sorts, right? A state of the ground rural India report on something that is more qualitative, more opinion, more cultural than things that are on employment or other things. So that's the way that I think this has value. And the product of it, the capturing of it, can be sharpened much more and can be planned. So this was the first attempt, and I think we had some ideas about where we wanted to take it, but we can be much better and sharper about it the next time.
Yeah, I was also thinking along the lines of what like Prachu said. But like for example, we always have the monsoon sessions of the parliament and the summer sessions of the parliament. So maybe we have some kind of a pre-series tapping into a certain MP from a certain area. They're looking at certain touch points. That way, we are able to tap into the local areas as well with their support. Working in the district or at the village level, and from then you can like cut across many states as well.
I think for me, just going back to the question of what the value of this process is, for it laying two things. First was that because of the fact that we didn't have a predefined agenda, we went into this with an open slate, and that allowed the priorities of people to emerge strongly. So it wasn't just that these are issues, they might have been known before, but we didn't know that they were this urgent and this pressing. For example, that of human animal conflict or pollution in rural areas. We may not have that may not have been at the front of our consciousness when we thought about rural development. So that was one thing where I felt like this process brought out those priorities strongly. And the
Mhm.
second aspect was that it encouraged a process of reflection in people themselves. For example, a participant in Meghalaya, he told me after the convening that nobody has asked us these kinds of questions, and that helped us think about these challenges. We've never actually thought about it in this way. So it also
Mm.
helped them articulate and solidify what their concerns and challenges are, and what they want, what they expect from the political process.
Fantastic. I think that's a good place for us to call this meeting to an end. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.